Hello, my name is Rick Houston, and welcome to the Scene Vault Podcast, your source for all things NASCAR history. Presented by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace.
And Earnhardt would say to us, boys, we're making history, and you didn't think about it. You know, you were just wanting to get through your job, and we didn't slow down and enjoy the moment. And Alan's so embarrassed he's got his uniform on, and Earnhardt is saying, Alan Kulwicki, right here, you know, at Quincy's. Yeah. Anybody wants an autograph?
Yeah.
So there's people over there watching. They put all the templates on the car. So we got done. We passed inspection. So then we got ready to put the car cover over the car, and the car cover wouldn't fit. The car was, I think it was 4 inches longer in the rear and 3 inches longer in the front. We had just about everything covered. Everybody thought that, you know, Chocolate was a Hell's Angel or whatever, and
Yeah.
and that David was a preacher, and you know, Will Lynn was a rock star, and I mean we had everything covered.
Now, what was your role in that?
So I was a designated driver.
The day NASCAR and all of us associated in any way with NASCAR forget its past, that's the day we don't have any future.
So where are you from originally?
So I was born and raised in Clemens, North Carolina,
Okay.
right down from the shop.
Okay.
And so back in the day, and I graduated from school in 1980, West Forsyth High School there in Clemens. Always been a car guy, love cars. Actually, my senior year, I had bought a wrecker, and that's how I made my side money. And then in 81, the guy I bought my wrecker from owned Independence Towing in Mount Airy, and he's like, we've been invited to tow at Rockingham. And he said, I'd love for you to bring your wrecker. So 81 and 82, I was one of the wrecker drivers with my own wrecker at Rockingham for the Cup race, which was always was a race fan and this and that. So
Now, how old were you at the time?
so I was 22 at the time.
Okay.
So then I went to work at Modern Chevrolet. I had went to Davidson County Community College and got business administration and auto mechanics. And a really good friend of mine, Bobby Moody, that I had met, he had worked at Modern Chevrolet in the body shop, and then he had went to work for Richard Childress Racing. Richard Childress had got Piedmont Airlines as a sponsor, and Bobby was the body man. So Bobby had called me a few times, said, I need some help here and there. And so I would go and help Bobby change all the cars over at nighttime when I wasn't in school and I wasn't working. And I helped Bobby, and me and Bobby had been friends. Bobby is an incredible body guy, and those cars were immaculate. And Bobby was pretty much doing it all himself. So I was Bobby's helper. And so working for free at RCR. And then
Now, what year was this?
This was in 82.
82. Okay.
And 82 and 83. So then Richard had saw my work ethics and this and that, and they had a lot of engine trouble. Lula Rosa at the time was the engine builder, and Richard was like, hey, we've got some really good sponsors coming on. Would you be interested in coming and tearing down engines for Lula Rosa and pulling them apart and helping us get all this stuff straightened out? And I'm like, okay, I love engines. So I came in and got hired in 84. So I came in and we'd just built a new shop on Gumtree Road, the engine shop.
Yeah.
So I had the car shop and then the engine shop. So went in and there were about 6 engines that were blown up at the time. And Richard actually, he did it all. Richard knew how to build engines, build gears, build transmissions, build cars. So my first few days, it was working in between Lula Rosa, and Richard was down there with us, tore engines apart, cleaned them up, learned how to get them ready to assemble back again. And you know, there's only a few guys. We had a cylinder head guy, a machinist guy that did everything. He did machine works on the block, did machine works on the heads, and then we had a engine assembler in Lula Rosa. So I was pretty much the cleanup guy there through the years. And So then we turned everything around. We worked night and day, and then that was '84. Then we came back and started winning championships after that, and it kind of took off. As we went, Lou was there till I think the end of '88, and then Eddie Lanier came in, and Lou and I were really tight together. And then Eddie Lanier, when he came in, I was Eddie's right-hand man, started building qualifying engines and this and that. And then Eddie wanted to slow down a little bit, and Spinny Clendenin was he started off as, like I did, at the same time I did. He was our machinist, and then he became engine builder. And after that, Earnhardt's like, okay, we're having the 31 car here, and I want my own guys. I want my own engine builder. I want to be able to have somebody that I can sit down and figure this stuff out with together. So '98, I became the chief engine builder the year we won the 500. And so that's my claim to fame, I guess you could say. Yeah. So as years went by, when we lost Earnhardt, it was devastating, of course. And Kevin came in and did a great job, but I had worked my guts out so hard for all those years, kind of got burnt out and wanted to slow down. So I went to Richard at the end of 2001 and said, man, a lot of pressure. I'd like to step back from being the chief engine builder. And so Richard's like, I have all these special projects that we want to do. So I kind of stepped back, and we worked on all kinds of special projects. Had GM Goodwrench as a sponsor, and we did our own valve covers and air cleaners. And, I was Richard's go-to guy, special projects or whatever, and still worked in the engine shop, went to the racetrack, still tuned engines and did. And, it's crazy through the years how time flies. And then fuel injection came into the play. And I'd always been a carburetor guy, and I'd always loved being on the dyno. Me and Spinny worked really close together through the years, with Greg Gunnell and all the people that worked, at the engine shop. And by this time, we had 20-some people in the engine shop. And when the fuel injection came, I think we were up to 105 employees. And it's like, they didn't
just in the engine shop?
Just in the engine shop.
Wow.
Because we had a R&D engine shop. At that time, things were, we had went to CNC cylinder heads, and I mean it had changed so much through the years, and roller lifters and roller rocker arms. I mean, and there were times when we were gaining 25 and 30 horsepower through the year, and the development was happening so fast. So you couldn't hardly keep up without having a research and development department. Then when fuel injection came, fuel injection brought in all kinds of stuff that I wasn't really prepared for. Be able to analyze the on throttle time, the brake pressures, and this and that. And it got to be where, this is my feeling, it got to be where the older guys like me, everything was designed on the computer. The cylinder heads were done on the computer. The camshafts done on the computer, and this and that. And I felt like my value was getting low. It's like I can remember times when me and Spinny would go in and do a piston test or take 5 camshafts, run them all in one day, and then say, okay, let's go back and change this one up. And then when you make power, you have that feeling inside like, man, we're making gains here. Well, all that was kind of gone. So then in 2018, Richard's like, I want to take this Xfinity program and I want to turn this thing around, and I want to make it to where we can promote younger guys. I want to be able to have younger engineers, younger crew chiefs, younger drivers, and be able to tell if they're going to make it to the Cup Series. So I went into managing, left the engine shop, went back to RCR, went to managing the Xfinity Series, and then in 2019 we won the championship with Reddick, and Reddick is exactly what Richard wanted to do. He wanted to take a young guy, promote him up, develop him, and his whole team went with him, Randall Burdett and the whole whole team. So it worked really well, and that's what we're doing today. You know, we have Austin Hill and Sheldon Creed both, and they're going to both end up in the Cup Series. And so we are basically, our department is a stepping stone, and we weed out the weak. I mean, just to say it right, if the guys can't perform, we don't keep them.
Yeah.
And it works really, really well.
Yeah. You've covered a lot of ground, and you have this unique perspective on Richard Childress Racing. I mean, you were there in the lean years, and you were there in the glory years, and now you're there now. You started in 1984, and that was the year that Dale came back to the team. And that year there were some engine problems. What do you remember about that, and what do you remember about what was done about it?
So I can remember Richard helped us solve the problem. So back in the day, all of the oil was going to the top end of the engine. And it was actually bleeding through the lifters.
Yeah.
And we came up and developed actual lifter sleeves to put in there that helped control the oil. And the thing was, we could run them on the dyno, and back then we didn't have chassis dynos or anything, and everything would be fine. We didn't have endurance dynos. Now it's so much different. We have these AVL dynos where they can run. They can tell you now exactly how hard the engine can go and how many cycles it can turn. And, you know, we did everything in miles back then. They know what loads are on the engines. And so when we figured it out, I mean, we had tore everything up. And, you know, you look at the parts and it's like, okay, it's starving for oil. Why is it doing, you know, our lines, you know, you're searching and you're searching. And when we finally figured it out, I mean, it was a fix overnight almost. Yeah. And we tore up a lot of stuff. We ran 12 laps, I think it was in 84, in both Pocono races.
Wow. Yeah.
It was 5 laps in one race and 7 laps in another race.
Yeah.
So that was because of the long straightaways, and all the oil was going to the top end, and we were basically starving the engine for oil.
Now, how much of the issue was due to engineering and mechanics and the parts and pieces of the engine, and how much of the issue was due to Dale's right foot?
So not very much of it was due to Dale's right foot, because what was happening was we were taking 010 blocks back in the day, still had the oil filter pads on them, and we were taking these blocks, and it was so crazy that years later, you found out that, okay, we can sonic test these blocks and we can figure out which one has core shift, and there's things to look at on the blocks. And it'll take you 3 days to get one of those blocks ready. And where the lifter sleeves were, you know, them things weren't but like 125 thousandths long. Then when you put a big camshaft in it, and the way that, you know, you got to have clearance, because we would get the engines really hot and the engines would be cold, and basically it was hemorrhaging around the lifter bores. Yeah. We put those sleeves in there that actually give us twice the material, and it fixed the problem overnight. So it wasn't really a right foot thing, and we had figured out that if we could just, you know, we never really made the most power. We figured out if we could just keep these things running, Earnhardt could figure out. There was days when we had a 15th or 16th place car, and he'd figure out how to finish 5th. Yeah, if we could keep the engines running.
So you had a perspective on Dale back then, and him coming back to the team. Early on, who was the Dale Earnhardt that you knew in those early years with the team?
So Dale Earnhardt was always incredible and misunderstood, and he wanted it that way. I can remember that we used to have a trailer. Our trailer was, you put a car in the back, and then you raise the car up, and then the other car goes in it. It was basically a box truck. Uh-huh. It was a Kentucky trailer. all the tires went in the front. There was no lounge. We had a hoist where we picked the toolbox up, put the toolbox in, and we were getting ready to leave. I believe it was Michigan, and brake lights wouldn't work. And he was like, okay, the green wire's the ground, the yellow wire's the, it's like he'd wired up, he knew all that stuff, and he would get in there and he would work right with us. One of the best stories is that Andy Petrie comes in and we're at Charlotte testing. And Andy has 2 pages. This is one of his first tests. He has 2 pages of stuff. We're going to do this. Earnhardt picks up that notepad and he goes, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. We're not doing this. And we're not doing this.
Yeah.
And Andy's like, I had a plan. This is going to send us in a direction. And he's like, how fast do you need me to run? Tell me how fast you need me to run. If I run that fast, we won't do any of this stuff. And it was like, yeah, Earnhardt always got his way. I mean, he always did. He knew what he wanted in a race car. He knew, you could do all these little bitty things. He basically knew what he wanted. I know we're jumping all over the place, but all of these races that we would go to when we did a lot of tests, he did not like to test, and anytime he could get somebody else, we've had Mike Dillon, Neil Bonnet. We've had all these people go test for Earnhardt because he didn't want to do it. He hated doing it.
Why was that? Why did he not like testing?
He wanted to race. He wanted to win everything, and he just felt like that, all right, he looked at it like, okay, the racetrack's going to change, and this is going to happen, and that's going to happen. It's probably not going to be the same tires, and you just get me close, and I'll figure out the rest.
Yeah.
He had the ability. We'd be in a race car. We'd be places like at Bristol where you're really, really busy. He could tell who was on the lead lap, who was a lap down, who was running fast. I can remember a couple times Kirk saying, you're the fastest car, and he would say, well, then why is Rusty getting bigger? Why can I see him in my mirror getting closer to me? How can I be the fastest car? And he had a feel for knowing exactly what he wanted, and he also had the ability. He would say stuff to us like, there's a 7/16 snap-on wrench in turn 2. And come to find out, there was a 7/16.
Yeah.
And we were at Michigan one time getting ready to qualify, and we did a qualifying practice, and he shut it off, and he said, the crank just broke. He's like, what? He said, yeah, the crank just broke. And that's when we had a qualifying engine in. We carried that thing back, and the crank had broke, and it didn't hurt the block. It didn't hurt anything. The crank broke in between the journals. I can remember Richard coming down and looking at that thing and say, I don't know how he knew that, but he got it cut off before it hurt anything. He was incredible at being able to – his feel was incredible. He was he had the ability to just feel things and be able to know what he wanted. There were lots of times when we would go out and we would not qualify good, not practice good, and he'd say, I'm not worried about it, I'll be all right.
Yeah.
And then in a race we were. It was and we were all like, we're not very good. But back in those days, everything was done with a stopwatch, and you were just hoping that maybe you missed him or this or that. He went more off of feel. He didn't care about the lap times. He just knew what he wanted it to feel like and how he wanted the car, to be underneath him.
You were telling me a story earlier about Alan Kulwicki.
Yes.
Tell me that one.
So it was about 1988, and we were at Darlington. And one of those deals, Darlington's South Carolina, the weather moves.
Would have been about 86, wasn't it?
Yeah, 86.
Okay,
it was 86.
Yeah.
86. Okay, yeah. And so Earnhardt was big into doing all this team stuff where he wanted, when we were at the racetrack, we did stuff together all the time.
Yeah.
And so he said, I'm going to get the van. We're going to go eat, boys. He said, well, we got an hour and a half here before we got up do anything else. So we all jumped in the van. It was me, David Smith, Will Lynn, Kirk Shelmerdine. And
now, who was driving the van?
So Earnhardt was driving the van.
Okay.
So he was in his street clothes and this and that. And so we're pulling up. We go, get Alan to come over here. So I opened the door up and said, hey, Kulwicki, come eat with us. We're going to go grab something to eat. He goes, no, I've got some things. And Earnhardt wouldn't take no for an answer. He's like, get in the van. We're just going to run down here and get something to eat. Come on. Well, I still have my driver's suit on. And he's like, be all right. Come on and go eat with us, man.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't take no for an answer. So Alan gets in the van. So Earnhardt drives straight to Quincy's. And this was when Alan Kulwicki drove the 35 car.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people remember that probably. This was before the 7. So we're standing in the line at Quincy's with everybody has the little trays and stuff. And Alan's so embarrassed he's got his uniform on. And Earnhardt is saying, Alan Kulwicki, right here, at Quincy's. Anybody wants an autograph?
Yeah.
And he loved it. But Earnhardt was so amazing about just putting people in those situations. I can remember when we were at Richmond, and I won't be able to tell you the girl's name, but we got off the airplane. I remember we flew Richards 421 up there, and Earnhardt had all these places. He always liked to do the same thing. So we're going to the Italian place to eat. And Reynolds people were there, and the new Winston girl was there. So
Miss Winston. Okay, yeah.
So Earnhardt's like, hey, come on, y'all go eat with us at the Italian place. So I'm not sure who the Winston, who was with them from Winston, but it was 2 guys from Winston and the new Winston girl. So we go to the Italian place right there by the airport, and so we get there and they go, hey, it's, I think, I'm not sure, but I think her name was Sharon. It's her birthday today.
Yeah.
And so awesome. So do this big deal. Everybody eats and okay, we're going to sing happy birthday to her. So Earnhardt's like, all right, boys, we're going to sing happy birthday to her. So we're a happy birthday to you. We got to the part where happy birthday to, and nobody knew what her name was. And we're like, happy birthday to you, And then Earnhardt laughed about it. He's like, sorry, we don't know what your name is, but it's just.
Now, was it actually her birthday?
Yeah, it was really her birthday.
Okay.
And we didn't realize we didn't know what her name was till we got to that part in the song. And
happy birthday, Miss Winston.
Yeah, yes. But that was her first trip, and. But he loved doing stuff like that, and he loved if he didn't pinch you or poke you or grab you or something like that. I mean, he did that on a regular basis to the people that he liked. So I can't say enough about how Richard and Dale, worked. They were really, really, really amazing together. It was so funny that so many times when Richard would come in and fight with the crew chiefs about the gear that's in the car or this or that, or because Richard had, he had driven. He knew that when you go to Rockingham, you don't need to turn all those RPMs, and when you go to Wilkesboro, you don't need to turn. And they paired really, really good together. They communicated awesome together. They would go hunting together. They would, they were really, really tight, and it helped our team amazingly.
So 1984, 1985, you won a couple of races each year. But then 1986, it seemed like you guys made a jump and wound up winning the championship that year. What was the difference?
We just put it all together. We got the engines to where they would run all the time. Kirk and Dale got to be where they understood each other a little bit better. And it's like we won a lot of races, but we should have won a whole lot more.
Yeah.
And, the point system's what it used to be, where, points are points. And it was just like so easy to do. We would just make sure that nothing came off the car, nothing fell off the car, and Earnhardt just figured out how to do it. I mean, he he was amazing of taking a car that wasn't that good and being able to figure out how to make it work. And Kirk was really brilliant. I can remember in '87, we're going to have a brand new Speedway car. And that car came out of the fab shop, and it was absolutely beautiful. And Kirk took and he cut that car up. He cut the nose on it. He cut the hood on it. He cut the fenders on it. He cut the back deck lid. And so we go to Daytona, and that car was really fast. I mean, really, really fast. And back then, they just had hand templates they would put on the car. And people were complaining about how this car looked so much different than all the rest of the Chevrolets and this and that. And I can remember looking at the car when it first came out, how beautiful it was. But after Kurt got through working on it, it looked like they had surgery done on it because it was all patched up. Yes. And so Dick Beatty was the guy. So he calls out and he goes, anybody that wants to see the templates put on the 3 car, be in pit stall number 1 at 3:30.
Wow.
So there's people over there watching. They put all the templates on the car. So we got done. We passed inspection. So then we got ready to put the car cover over the car, and the car cover wouldn't fit. The car was, I think it was 4 inches longer in the rear and 3 inches longer in the front. And we had made the car cover off of a basic car. And it's like, what do we do now? We ended up tearing the car cover to get it to go over the car. But Kirk was, you go to the wind tunnel, but it wasn't really like the racetrack. Kirk knew that, those cars, when you lay those spoilers down, that getting that spoiler further back makes the car drive a whole lot better. It's there's so many things that happen through the years that you look back on. I can remember back, 86, 87, even after that, we would go to Victory Lane and it would be like, okay, let's hurry up and get our picture made. We got to tear the engine down. That back then they pulled the engine all the way apart, and you pulled the cylinder head off of it, and they checked the stroke on the crank, and they measured the piston. They did all this stuff in the car. And Earnhardt would say to us, boys, we're making history, and you didn't think about it. You were just wanting to get through your job, and we didn't slow down and enjoy the moment. As you get older, you look back on stuff, and you look at them, man, that was a great, great day. You just kind of get it done. And I wish it would have slowed down a little bit more. Yeah. But that he had the vision for. He knew that we were making history, and we didn't even really think about it until later on.
1986 was good. You won the championship, and that's obviously a good thing. But 1987 was something even a step beyond that. I mean, you were this close to winning, 5 or 6 or 7 straight races at the beginning of the year. What was it like to go to the racetrack on that kind of roll?
We couldn't hardly do anything wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a system. We had a lot of issues through the years early on, and Richard would come in and say, Richard always had a plan. He'd come in and say, okay, I want a better checklist. I want you to be able to initial so we can look back and say who's responsible for this and for that. And we built this stuff through the years, and we had got the engines better. We had got, we were, back then you had qualifying. You would go to some of these races and you would put qualifying engine in, and then you'd put a practice engine in, then you'd pull that practice engine out, and then you'd put your race engine in. Yeah. And these were the same guys that were doing all the pit stops. And we just figured out how to make each guy responsible for his part, and you would know that whose part it was. And then that takes, you don't want your part to have any issues. You want to make sure that everything that's underneath you is taken care of. And we didn't take any chances. We had the best of everything. We were able to buy back in the day, Richard didn't have car dealerships or rental trucks or this or that, and we were on a really tight budget. But after we had started winning, Richard would give us anything that we needed. We would go to the racetrack with new starters and new alternators and just made our parts better and better and better. And Chevrolet actually got their stuff a lot better. The cylinder heads and the blocks had got better, and we grew together.
So Dale was obviously dominating on the racetrack, and he was becoming a rock star at that point. But on pit road, you guys had a cast of characters as well. You had Chocolate, the big burly bear or whatever. You had Will with the rock star hair. Mm-hmm. You had David Smith, who was praying for everybody. What was it like on the road being the team to beat in that cast of characters? On pit road.
So it was incredible how close everybody, how tight everybody was together.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if we were down, David did a really good job of, it didn't matter what was happening. David was like, we're winning.
Yeah.
And Chocolate, Chocolate had a niche for detail stuff. I mean, it's so crazy Chocolate would do anything. It didn't matter what it was. And I can remember we made him, he was the underneath guy. The first thing he did is he made this little kit that had everything he needed, every wrench,
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
it was like we took ownership for our own part. And, Kirk let us handle. I can never remember a time when Richard or Kirk ever had to come and say, okay, we need to be at the racetrack at this time, and we're going to do this. We're going to, we just meshed really good. It was like everybody was so different that it worked really, really good together. We had just about everything covered. Everybody thought that, Chocolate was a Hell's Angel or whatever, and
Yeah.
and that David was a preacher, and Will Lynn was a rock star, and I mean we had everything covered.
Now, what was your role in that?
So I was a designated driver.
Yeah.
I've never had any alcohol, never drank or this or that, and I made sure that Kirk would tell me take care of the guys or this or that. Kirk stayed in his room and studied a lot. I mean,
Did he really?
He rarely would go out to eat with us.
Yeah.
Now, David Smith, he knew where he wanted to. He knew what he was going to eat. He knew where we were going to go. Will Lynn, he was our chairman of fun. Will always had a good time. Will always had a plan, and this and that. So we worked so good together. I mean, it was a great group.